Hello, hello. I spent yesterday night all night recording how I set up new full stack dotnet project. Recommend you have Docker Desktop installed and the dotnet Core CLI. So dotnet version and Docker version. So you have those both installed. And yesterday I clicked a new solution, but now I already have it, so I'm going to click this one. I have a setup that resembles Jason Taylor's clean architecture. So if you want to find out more, check that out. But I'm going to run multiple projects, so I'll try to, yeah, I'll have a slightly different setup. So then you should have like an empty solution or whatever. And then you create your first project. New project. I already created it, but you make sure you have a web API because the web app is a Razor Pages one. The web app MVC is like it says MVC. That's not what we want. We want a web API without authentication because we're going to use JSON web token authentication later on. Then you click create, give it a name, of course. I already did that. This is the Pet Social API, but we're actually getting ahead of ourselves. We should first set up the Docker configuration. So I advise you to do that just in the main solution folder or whatever. I want it different. As I want multiple projects, I want different databases, different Docker setups, etc. So yeah, I just included it here. Then, of course, it's always good to create a README file. I just add some instructions in it and things I would forget if I don't create README files. So actually create a Docker Compose file and have something like this set up for a Microsoft SQL database container running in a Docker container. Okay, you could have multiple services, but I'm just going to use the database. You could have one more for example, Redis for caching, then have the configuration there. I'm not going to do that now. So important, of course, the image that's gonna download the Microsoft SQL database, SQL Server Docker image, container name, ports, local hosts on port 1433, environment variables, the password, and accept EULA. That's something like accepting the license or the terms and conditions, something like that. Okay. Then I have already created it, but let me remove this one. This should delete my database. Just gonna delete it. Now we're at it. Oops, what's happening here? Actually, going to undo some of the work I did yesterday. Okay. Database related stuff. Okay. So first off, the full command for creating, like for running this Docker image is the following, with except EULA, however you pronounce that. Yes, the Y stands for yes, with the password. Password you can find in here. Yeah, you should actually, if you run this command, of course, put in the password you want. But it's possible that for the first time, if you don't have this image yet, that you might have to run this first, just like to accept to these terms in the console command line. I didn't really test this again. I mean, this is gonna work. This is gonna create an image and run it, like run the Docker container. But I haven't really tested if I already did this once, so I'm not gonna do it again. I'm just gonna run this command. This should actually do something similar, but using the configuration settings in Docker Compose.yaml. The thing is, I don't know if you have never done it before and you straight up run this command. I'm not sure if it's gonna work. So that's why this line is still valid. But anyway, you can, if you wanted to find out more about all these commands, Docker, you can most definitely find out on your own. I'm just going to show how to quickly set it up. So let's run this one, Docker Compose and the terminal. Yeah, of course, let's point to the correct make sure we're in the right directory. So this went pretty fast because I had already done this once and the image was already downloaded. For the first time, this might take a little longer. But this should like work, but hey, I went through the whole entity framework and identity framework again while recording, and then I noticed only the first 10 minutes actually recorded. So I wasted another, I don't know, half an hour of recording because I'm using the free version of Bandicam. So let's do it all over again. Third time's the charm. Okay, so apparently we ended here in the last video. And we run this command, creating the master database running in a Docker container. I need to make sure I'm in the right folder. This is where we ended last time. So if we check Docker desktop, I have this bad social running. Notice this is running in some kind of collapsible group. This is thanks to the -p command, which stands for, I think, project directory or project name or something. And this is the name of this group. Why I did it this way is I noticed just running this one straight away creates this container just only this container running on the specified ports, etc. But I noticed when I have multiple of these, multiple databases, like not grouped, that somehow they got mixed up. So I was actually I click play on this one and I check my database. Let's just delete this one. And then I check my database and I notice it's the wrong database which I'm connecting to. But anyway, so now this is running locally. So we have Microsoft SQL Server running locally in Docker, in the Docker container. If we try to connect to this, I have a lightweight program to connect to it. It's Stable Plus, but I'm using the free trial, which really limits my ability, my functionalities. So yeah, let's say MSSQL. It's called a split social, and I like to add local to the name, the tag local host as localhost 001, like specified in the. This is all specified in the Docker Compose file. Password. This one. This actually, the user and the password is not applicable yet because we didn't actually create a pet social database yet. It's just a default root database, so to speak, from the MySQL server. So if it does this, it's going to say we can't connect because this user and database doesn't exist yet. Driver error. So if we connect to the master, this should work. Let's connect to it, and you see you have some things we don't want to touch. This is like the master database, like the root database. Okay, so later on we'll access our own pet social database, but we first have to create it using entity framework. I'm gonna have to watch the time here. This is all for setting up a database in my Microsoft SQL Server database running in default database running in Docker, in a Docker container locally. Next thing is we can add our connection string to the app setting. I'm not sure if I already explained. I created a web API project just by doing something like add new project, ASP.NET Core web application, use the web API, no authentication because we'll use JSON web token authentication later on, and then you just create it. This is the API, which then has app settings and app settings development. And the development one, we'll set our connection string for our local to connect to our local database. And in the app settings, you would add your production connection string to connect to the production database, but that's something for later. I have to watch my time here. Can only record 10 minutes at once. So this again is the same as defined in the Docker Compose. So the server is the local host on this port, and this database with the user and the password. This is not accessible yet, but will be soon. To actually connect to the database, we'll create a database project. I moved it over in the libs folder, but if you refer to Jason Taylor's clean architecture template, it will be called something like infrastructure. The reason I'm creating this here is because I'm going to have multiple databases and multiple backends. So I want to reuse this database project. Yeah, like refer to it in another API, another backend. Anyway, so if you create a new, so normally you then create a new project, a class library, and call it data context or database or whatever you want to call it. And you should create a new, that should create a new project with one class. I call this configure services. This is going to be the entry point of this, where I configure services and yeah, other things. For example, the database. This is a static class with the static method add_pet_socialdb. With parameters, the services and the configuration coming from the API project. So we can yeah, call this one. Yeah, just add it to our startup and run it. Okay. Make sure we have the code to connect to our database. Let's first set up the, make sure you have iServices collection and not just services collection, because then if you do this, this will not work. Also, make sure you refer to this project, like add a reference and have it included in your CS proj file. Edit. I'm running out of time, so here it's included. For this to work. Next up, we should make our database context or database model that uses entity framework. So let's add a class to our database layer. I call this pet social DB context. You can call it data context, like in Jason Taylor's template. Just a class. An important is that we inherit from DB context. DB context is coming from the entity framework NuGet package. So let's make sure you have this one. Let's see. Of course, you do manage NuGet packages and install those to your project. I'm just going to show you. It's just these two, Entity Framework Core and Entity Framework Core.design. Yes, and Entity Framework Core SQL Server. So you can access, you can configure this DB context to use SQL Server using your default connection as ConnectionString, which resides in the app settings. It's this one, ConnectionString default connection. Okay. This is a interface I made. Just some kind of abstraction thing. Don't worry about it too much. It's gonna help me later on when I'm coding the business logic. but make sure you have this code and you have registered the class library. And then to actually pass the connection string to entity framework, you will need a constructor passing down the DB context options to the base, so to this DB context to entity framework. And at this point, you can update, you can create the pet social, yeah, so I called it pet social database, but you can actually update this database. Am I, oops, make sure I'm, Cuba, still, my dog is barking at something. Sorry for that. Ah, you. Okay, update the database. And now we should be able to connect to, yeah, make sure it's running, of course. Yeah, it should be running because we ran that command. And now we should be able to connect instead of to the master to the, oops, edit the connection, connect to the pet social database using this user and the password. Let's test that connection is okay, and we should have an empty database with no migrations yet applied. Okay. So this is the basic setup. And the next thing we can now do is actually add tables and data to this database. We do this by creating entities, like modeling the tables we want, modeling our data. Yeah. Creating a model for our database using entities. I moved these entities in another folder, and I reference that folder in here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this one. Feel free to just add it in your wherever you like. Just make sure you reference it. And then let me see. I created an entity called user profile, having some columns. This is going to be translated to columns. So name, email, phone number is email confirmed, and I inherit some common properties like that I'm going to use on every entity on every table. Actually, I want these included in every table. So I create an abstract class to inherit from. Abstract, so entity framework doesn't see this as an entity on its own or a table on its own. So it's not going to create a table auditable entity, luckily. Okay, maybe I'm going a little bit too fast. That's because of the time restrictions on my recording. But what we need to do is actually tell our DB context that we want a user profiles table. We do that by adding a DB set with the entity user profile and call it the table name user profiles, a plural. We also add this for later usage to our interface, but it's not important right now. And now we should be able to create a migration. If we look at the README, do it like that, change the name of the migration, of course, to what you want. I don't know if I already explained it, but this project and started project parameters is because of this setup. We have to say target our database project using the configuration from our startup project. So our API that holds the connection string. Okay, let's create the first migration and call it user profiles. Let's see. It succeeded. What this should do is create a folder in our database project migrations with our first migration and the database snapshot. Don't worry about the snapshot now. And the code to actually create the table. We didn't apply it yet, so it's not. So let's do that now by updating our database. Yeah. Okay, so it should be applied. We have the user profiles table now with these fields specified in user profile name, email, phone number is email confirmed, and the columns from the auditable entity. And you see we don't have an auditable entity table. Luckily, we just have these fields because of the inheritance. And you'll see one migration applied. So, okay, migration ID, user profiles. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing, you could, I'm running out of time again. Just gonna let it play out for a second. For 30 seconds. Take a sip of water. Okay, we're back. Some other things we could do, which might be of interest to you, is override some entity framework methods like on model creating. And for example, if we want the user profile's email to be unique, so we don't accidentally create the same users, at least with the same credentials, we can add a constraint for that. So you do it like this on the user profile target, the property, the table column, and is unique. Of course, you have to create a new migration for this and apply it to the database for it to become effective. These two lines, honestly, I didn't take the time to figure out what it does. But yeah, let me know if you know what this does. I can guess, but I'm not going to guess. So yeah, I stole this from the Jason Taylor's clean architecture template. So cool. gonna comment this out again. Actually, no, I'm gonna leave it out. Another thing you could do, we have these extra auditable entities. Yeah, if you hear some weird background noises, it's my dogs ripping up boxes, carton. Okay. So override another method. Save changes async is every time we save a change to our pet social DB context. So when we're creating data or updating data, we want to fill these properties that were set on the auditable entity. So every time something gets created, we want to, later on we'll want to see which user did that operation and when. Same for modification. So when it's updated, when something's updated, we can do this here instead of risking to forget it when we actually, or having to do it every time we write some business logic. So just something nice, also from the Jason Taylor's clean architecture. Okay. So the next thing, I hope everything you can replicate everything without problems. The next thing would be to add authentication, and for that we would like to use the identity framework. All you need to change for that is in your database context, you want to, instead of inherit from this entity framework DB context, you want to inherit from identity DB context and have the user type identity user. This is all just coming from default identity. This identity user contains all default columns and tables needed for authentication, registration, authentication. Of course, we'll need these identity packages, NuGet packages. I'm going to show this here. So those ones, identity framework core and identity.ui. I have a rather older version, but just make sure the versions are consistent. We don't, yeah. Okay, I might have not showed it yet. I'm not sure if I showed it, but on the API project, we on the siege, we also installed this entity framework core design, which is needed to run these dotnet EF database commands because we specified the API project as the startup project. So if you didn't, it's just going to error and tell you you should install this one. Also on the API. Just don't forget to do that. If you didn't, you'll probably encounter the error. Okay, so we did that. So we did this. Then we at the configure services. Jason Taylor calls this file dependency injection. You can call it whatever you like. I like to call it that because it's actually configuring services. And then you make sure to add the identity with this default user. The roles is going to be, we're going to use those later on, but yeah, do that. Default token providers is important for like confirming accounts through email and all that stuff. It's going to generate tokens. So let's do that. If we now to actually see this, like have the tables generated for this identity user, we need to add a migration and apply it. So we can do that. Call the migration identity. Also make sure to always check your migration, because yeah, that it doesn't do duplicate things. It should start from the previous. It should assume that the previous migration is already applied. So it's gonna create all these default identity tables. Let's update the database using this update command, and then let's check out the, so we have another migration applied, and you see all these tables were created. The most important ones for us is the ASP.NET users and maybe the roles. First off, the users, you see all these fields. The only ones I find important is of course ID, username, email confirmed, phone number. The rest I'm not really going to use after account creation or whatever. So if you want to extend this, I'm gonna have to, my time is gonna run out again. If you want to extend this, let's say you want to add the, be able to capture the user's address, you can change this one. For example, with application user, that has to implement the inherit from the identity user, sorry. Then make a property string, for example, street, and make sure you use the application user over here. And if you then create a new migration and apply it, you should see the table street added to this, the column street added to this ASP.NET users. And you could extend it however you like. I don't like to do this. I see no use in that. So I'm just going to revert this stuff to basic identity user. What I like to do is just like Jason Taylor does in his clean architecture, is create an entity user profile and then just only work with this one. Copy over the fields I find important on the identity user, and this is going to happen, of course, after registration. And then from then on, just use a user profile in my business logic instead of these, instead of directly accessing the identity framework and stuff. It's, the reasoning is something with not having these identity and entity framework dependencies throughout your code base, which, You have some people who agree with that and not agree with that. Both smart people, both smart people on both sides. I mean, anyway, this has of course some implications on our business logic. For example, when you authenticate, you will want to return the user profile object instead of the application, the identity user. Also, yeah, which results in working around some stuff. It's up to you if you want to follow that or not. If you just have a simple application, I wouldn't go that far and just directly make like an auth controller and access the authentication identity user. Okay, what's next? I hope you all can follow along without any problems. What would be next is seeding. So let's say you want to add some test users to your database or test data, whatever. In my scenario, I'm already going to add some custom roles, some user roles, using this code. Sorry, let me comment this out. To seed data, you just need to have this line of code where you specify the entity you want to, the table you want to seed, so to speak. Could be like one of your entities, user profile or identity role. This is actually some kind of default identity object. So it's not obvious that you can use it, but you can. And then we want to fill this with custom identity roles. Created like this. I created this in the shared common folder because I'm gonna use these roles throughout my backend and frontend projects. I created this in the constants and of course made sure I reference, so like add reference to this project, and then you see here and that this project is referenced. Of course, this one is also just a class library containing some constants, some classes with constants, static. I made an array of, first of all, I defined the roles, the custom roles. I like to uppercase them and not use spaces because I sometimes use these, iterate over these roles and fill, for example, a HTML select with these roles. And if you then have spaces, it kind of breaks. At least if you use this as the option value. Anyway, I have this array here, I'm looping over and returning a new identity with the name and the normalized name. This normalized name is actually the name would be just like, for example, lowercase administrator or something, and then the normalized name would be uppercased with, and replacing the spaces with underscores. So you could like write some logic for that, but I just like to define my roles like this, so I don't have to do anything special for the normalized name. And then execute it. Write a statement. This will be translated inside a so to actually seed, you have to create a migration. So let's do that. Oops. If you don't see what I'm doing, I'm just using my command line, my terminal to do this. Let's say seed user. Yeah, let's call it seed user roles. Edit. And then we should see our migrations to get an extra. If my IDE wants to load this. IDE is not refreshing. Anyway, this should create a migration. Come on. How do I check this IDE to? Time is not on my side. So I'm just gonna. So this should create a migration with some kind of statement like insert this data into the table ASP.NET user roles. But important is that you only need this code to generate a migration. So actually, yeah, of course, you want to move this to a separate class or a separate method at least, not have like all your seeds in this method, of course, just for readability. But after that, you want to, after the migration is created, you want to comment this out again, because every time your app starts, or you do, I mean, every first database call, I think every database interaction, this code runs, so it would actually run through the seeding code again and again and again. This is not going to slow you down a lot, but if you like seed from JSON files or some other files, or do some more or seed a lot of things, a lot of data, then it's gonna definitely slow your database calls down, especially the first one. I noticed that with my Razor Pages project. It's like my first database call took like 10 seconds or something. It was insane. So yeah. Let's check out the migration. So it's translated that into insert this data, these roles, and of course we have to apply this to the database by using the .NET EF database update command. And all of this, of course, is pretty well documented in the official Microsoft documentation pages. So if we refresh the database, we have these roles seeded. And from now on, we don't need this code anymore because we have the migration. Okay,